I was 3 months into my Dubai rotation, stuck in a summer so hot it felt like breathing through a wet blanket. Leo, I just saw a copy of Ms. Lynn's passport. Her birthday's next Wednesday. Kevin leaned over my cubicle wall, his eyes wide with the thrill of discovery. I pushed aside the quarterly report I was working on and raised an eyebrow. And how, exactly, did you come across that particular piece of intel? Just trying to be a good corporate citizen, he said, scratching his head. You know, boost team morale. We're all working our butts off out here. We should do something for her. I glanced across the office to where Caroline Lynn sat in her glass-walled corner. She was staring intently at her monitor, long fingers flying across the keyboard, a slight frown creasing her brow. The desert sun streamed through the window, etching her profile in sharp, intimidating lines. All right, I'm in, I decided, slapping my desk. But we keep it under wraps. Total surprise. On Wednesday, while Caroline was out at a client meeting, the four of us sprang into action. Jessica was on cake duty, David went to pick up decorations, and Kevin and I were on morale duty, which mostly involved making bad jokes. So, how do we get into her suite? Jessica asked, voicing the million-dollar question. We can't exactly text her, hey, we're throwing you a surprise party. Kills the surprise part. I thought for a second, then a grin spread across my face. I've got an idea. I'll text her, tell her to come to my room, that there's a surprise waiting. Whoa, Kevin said, his eyebrows shooting up. Leo, my man, that text could be interpreted in a number of ways. Get out of here, I laughed, shoving him lightly. It's just to create a little suspense. By 7, we were all gathered in my hotel suite, which we decked out with enough balloons and streamers to look like a promposal gone wrong. Showtime is 8 o'clock sharp, I announced, checking my watch. I already sent the text. I pulled out my phone to show them. The message I'd sent to Caroline that afternoon read, big surprise for you tonight. My room, 8 p.m. Door will be open. Her only reply had been a single blushing, smiley face emoji. Kevin leaned over my shoulder to get a look. Dude, he whistled. That phrasing. You sure she's not going to get the wrong idea? What wrong idea? I said, waving him off. She's our boss, not some naive kid. At precisely 8 o'clock, we killed the main lights, leaving only the colored string lights twinkling. The four of us found hiding spots around the room, breathing as quietly as we could. I stood behind the door, a party popper in my hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, growing closer. I put a finger to my lips, and the others tensed. The door swung open. Surprise! I yelled, twisting the party popper. A shower of confetti exploded into the air. The lights flashed on, a speaker started blasting Happy Birthday, and we all shouted in unison, Happy Birthday, Caroline. And then time froze. It was Caroline, all right, but it wasn't the impeccably tailored, all-business director we knew. She was wearing a black lace teddy, a sheer, scandalous thing that left very little to the imagination. Her long hair was down, cascading over her shoulders, and her makeup was perfect, her lips a stunning cherry red. And to top it all off, she was holding a bottle of Merlot and 2 wine glasses. The look of hopeful anticipation on her face curdled into shock, then into a kind of spectacular, 5-alarm mortification. A deep blush crept up from her neck, consuming her face and the tips of her ears. The four of us were statues. The cake in Jessica's hands wobbled precariously. David's glasses slid down his nose. Kevin's jaw was practically on the floor. As for me, my brain blue-screened. I was still holding the empty party popper in the air. 5 people, 10 eyes, and an atmosphere so thick you could slice it with a knife. This is... Caroline's voice was a trembling whisper. She looked down at her outfit, then up at the balloons, the streamers, the birthday cake, and the 4 gaping faces of her direct reports. I was the first to snap out of it. Happy birthday, Ms. Lynn. The others quickly chimed in. Happy birthday. Your text message. She managed, her voice barely audible. It said, in your room. My blood turned to ice. Oh God. Kevin's stupid joke had come true. No. I flapped my hands around like an idiot. I meant. Kevin, what did I mean? Oh my God, this is a huge misunderstanding. The look on Caroline's face was that of a squirrel caught in the high beams of a Mack truck. She gave her nearly transparent outfit one last, horrified glance, then spun around to flee. Caroline, wait. I instinctively reached out and grabbed her wrist. The motion made her stumble, and she nearly fell into my arms. The wine bottle slipped from her grasp, landing softly on the carpet and rolling in a slow circle. Another dead silence. I'm going to go change, she finally said, pulling her arm free and bolting from the room without another look back. After the door slammed shut, the four of us just stared at each other. Should I just start packing my bags now? I muttered. Jessica was the first to break. A snort escaped her, then a giggle, then she was howling. David followed, and soon even Kevin couldn't hold it in. In seconds, we were all bent over, clutching our stomachs, laughing so hard tears streamed down our faces. Leo, Kevin gasped, wiping his eyes. That was, without a doubt, the most surprising surprise party ever. Shut up, I groaned, rubbing my temples. I'm a dead man. She's going to fire me. Slowly. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. We composed ourselves, and I took a deep breath before opening the door. It was Caroline, now in jeans and a polo shirt, her hair pulled back into its usual severe ponytail. The blush, however, still lingered on her cheeks. She was holding a small, gift-wrapped box. Her expression was complicated. Happy birthday, Ms. Lynn, I said lamely, stepping aside to let her in. The other three stood up and chorused, Happy birthday, Caroline. Her eyes swept over the decorations, the cake, and the now open bottle of Merlot that no one had dared touch. She pressed her lips together, fighting a smile. Thank you all for the thoughtful preparation. She put a special emphasis on the word thoughtful, a corner of her mouth twitching, even if the execution was a little unexpected. We all let out a collective sigh of relief. The tension in the room finally broke. Time for cake, Caroline, Jessica said, handing her a plastic knife. She nodded and walked toward the cake. Just then, some demon possessed Kevin, and he blurted out, So, Ms. Lynn, that outfit, was that just for Leo? The air solidified again. Caroline's hand froze over the cake, the tip of the knife trembling. I wanted to strangle Kevin. But then, to everyone's astonishment, she laughed. Not a polite, corporate chuckle, but a real, unrestrained laugh that made her shoulders shake and brought fresh tears to her eyes. Yes, she admitted, dabbing at the corner of her eye. I thought Leo's invitation was for her. Well, she gestured vaguely. I actually went out and bought it this afternoon. Now, it was our turn to be stunned. The Ice Queen, Caroline Lynn, had gotten dressed up over an ambiguous text and admitted it. Caroline, I swear, I just wanted to do something nice for your birthday, I said, holding up my hands in surrender. The text was just a really, really poor choice of words. I know, she said, cutting a slice of cake and handing it to me. Her eyes held a new, mischievous glint. But, Leo, next time you want to ask me out, you can just say so. No need to be so subtle. The room erupted in laughter. I took the cake, my face burning. We finished the bottle of wine that night, shared the cake, and talked about anything and everything except work. Caroline even told us an embarrassing story from her college days, revealing a side of her we'd never seen. When I walked her to her door, she turned and said softly, Leo, thank you for the surprise. As awkward as it was, it's the most memorable birthday I've ever had. The look in her eyes made my heart skip a beat. You're welcome, Caroline, I managed. Next year, I'll work on my phrasing. She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed her face. Back in my suite, Kevin and Jessica were cleaning up. Kevin shot me a look, wiggling his eyebrows. Looking good, Leo. I think you're in there. Just shut up, I said, throwing a pillow at him. And what happened tonight does not leave this room. Got it. But I knew that disastrously wonderful misunderstanding was something I would never forget. I walked into the office with dark circles under my eyes. Every time I closed them last night, all I could see was Caroline in that black lace number, the blush spreading down her neck as she turned to run. Morning, Leo, Kevin chirped, dragging out the words. Get a good night's rest. Jessica poked her head out of the break room, holding a mug. Need a triple espresso, Leo? Or maybe some B vitamins. Even quiet David pushed his glasses up his nose, the corner of his mouth twitching. That's enough out of you guys, I hissed. Not another word about yesterday. Especially not in front of her. Right on cue, the main office door opened and Caroline strode in, her heels clicking decisively on the floor. The chatter died instantly. Everyone snapped back to their desks, pretending to be engrossed in their work. I snuck a glance. She was back in a navy blue power suit, her hair in that flawless ponytail. But her lipstick seemed a shade softer than usual. Her gaze swept the room, pausing for a fraction of a second on me before moving on. I want the project progress report in my inbox by 10, she announced to the room, then disappeared into her office, closing the door behind her. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Okay, she was going to pretend it never happened. At 10 o'clock sharp, I knocked on her door. Come in. Her voice was the calm, controlled instrument of a director, a world away from the woman who'd laughed until she cried the night before. I placed a flash drive on her desk. Here's the report you asked for, Caroline. Thanks. She didn't look up from her computer. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. Wait. She pulled a small paper bag from her drawer and pushed it across the desk toward me. For you. I opened it curiously. Inside was a box of Advil and a bottle of high-potency vitamin B complex. You had a lot to drink last night, she said, her eyes still glued to the screen, though I could see the tips of her ears turning pink. We have a client meeting today. I don't want you screwing it up. I froze. Was this the same notoriously tough Caroline Lynn? Thanks for your concern, Miss. Lynn, I said, trying to keep the smile out of my voice. It's not concern, she said, finally looking up, her professional mask firmly back in place. It's damage control for the project. But as she reached for her coffee mug, I noticed her fingernails. They weren't their usual practical, neutral shade. They were painted a soft, pearly pink. The discovery made my heart beat a little faster. Friday night, 9 o'clock. I was on a treadmill at the hotel gym when my phone started buzzing like a trapped hornet. Leo, we got a massive problem. Kevin's voice was a high-pitched squeal. The whole system just crashed. All the tests on the UAE side are failing. I slammed the emergency stop button. Have you told Caroline? She said meet in the conference room in 30. We have to go back to the office now. I took the fastest shower of my life and was at the office 10 minutes later. Caroline was already there. She'd changed into jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair in a messy ponytail. She was wearing a pair of black-rimmed glasses I'd never seen before, and they made her look kind of adorable. The problem is here, she said, pointing to the projection screen. Her voice was steady. David traced it to an interface protocol incompatibility. We need to rewrite a chunk of the code. For the next 6 hours, the 5 of us were crammed in that conference room, fueled by coffee and sheer panic. Caroline was incredible, a technical wizard who personally devised the solutions for the most critical algorithm fixes. At 3 in the morning, the last bug was squashed. Test passed, Kevin shouted, throwing his hands in the air. Great work, everyone, Caroline said, rubbing her temples and knocking her glasses askew. Come in at 2 p.m. tomorrow. I mean today. The others shuffled out, exhausted. I stayed behind to organize the documents. When I looked up, I saw Caroline had fallen asleep, slumped in her chair. Her glasses were crooked, her lips slightly parted. She looked nothing like the powerhouse director from a few hours ago. I walked over quietly, not wanting to wake her. As I hesitated, her head lolled to the side, coming to rest on my shoulder. Caroline, I whispered. She didn't stir. She just shifted a little, finding a more comfortable position. I stood there, frozen, breathing in the faint, clean scent of her shampoo. After what felt like an eternity, she startled awake, sitting bolt upright. What time is it? 4:20, I said, handing her a glass of water. You were exhausted. She took the glass, her fingers brushing against mine. It felt like a tiny jolt of electricity. She drank gracefully, the column of her throat moving as she swallowed. Thanks, she said, putting the cup down. Then, out of nowhere, today is the anniversary of my mother's death. I was floored. I never would have expected her to share something so personal. I missed her last birthday because I had to work late, she continued, taking off her glasses to rub her eyes. After that, I just stopped celebrating mine. It clicked. In all the years I'd known her, she'd never once had a birthday party. So on Wednesday night, I blurted out, then immediately wanted to bite my tongue off. Her face flushed again, but this time she didn't look away. I thought you were asking me. You know, after all, we've been what? My heart was pounding. Nothing. She stood up, the director persona snapping back into place. Finish up the documents and get some rest. At the door, she paused and looked back. Leo, thanks again for the surprise. I haven't let myself relax like that in a long time. Her words felt like a firework going off inside my chest. At the project wrap-up party, the alcohol worked its magic. Caroline, flushed and laughing, had kicked off her heels and was walking around barefoot on the plush carpet. Didn't take you for a lightweight, Caroline, I said, perching on the arm of the sofa next to her. Call me Caroline, she said, tilting her head back to look at me, her eyes sparkling. We're off the clock. Does that mean you have to call me Leo instead of my last name? I joked. She made a face. Please, you're younger than me, so I should call you ma'am? I second that. Kevin yelled from across the room, and a chorus of agreement followed. When the party wound down, I offered to walk her back to her suite. Inside the elevator, she leaned against the wall and said, I noticed you a long time ago, you know. When? My pulse quickened. Last year's company holiday party, she said, fiddling with her fingers. You sang Don't Stop Believing completely off-key. It was memorable. I laughed. That's called artistic interpretation. When the elevator reached her floor, the mood shifted. The walk down the quiet hallway felt charged with unspoken energy. Do you want to come in for a nightcap? She asked softly as we stopped at her door. My eyes involuntarily flicked toward her closet. That black lace thing was probably hanging in there. Maybe not tonight, I said, forcing my gaze away. Sanity won out over instinct. We have that early debriefing tomorrow. She nodded, a flicker of something I couldn't read in her eyes. Good night, Leo. Back in my own room, I tossed and turned. My phone buzzed. It was a text from her. That night, I really wished you were serious. I stared at the screen for a full minute before typing back why. Her reply was almost instantaneous. Because I was looking for an excuse to get closer to you. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. Do you still need one? No. Another message immediately followed. Breakfast tomorrow? Just us. I practically threw my phone in the air. Does this mean I don't have to watch my phrasing anymore? She sent back a winking emoji. It was only the second time I'd ever seen her use one. I stared at the ceiling, a slow grin spreading across my face. Maybe that disastrous birthday surprise was the smartest thing I'd ever done. The Monday morning elevator was packed. Caroline and I stood on opposite sides, maintaining a perfect professional distance. We'd agreed to keep things quiet at the office, at least for now. The elevator stopped on 25, and a new wave of people pushed in. Someone jostled Caroline, and she stumbled. I instinctively reached out, my hand landing on the small of her back to steady her. It was a 2-second interaction, but it didn't escape the notice of Mr. Henderson from finance, who was standing right next to us. You two seem close, Henderson said, a knowing smirk on his face as his eyes darted between us. Caroline immediately straightened up, pulling away from my hand. Her professional smile was flawless. Leo was just making sure I didn't fall. Can't have a delayed project timeline. But the gossip mill was already churning. By lunchtime, I had 3 different messages from coworkers asking for the scoop. Kevin slid into the seat across from me in the cafeteria, his tray rattling. Leo, the whole office is saying you and Caroline are. Eat your food, Kevin, I muttered, but then I saw her. Caroline was standing at the entrance to the cafeteria. Her eyes met mine for a second before she turned and walked away. At 3 o'clock, we both got an email from HR in New York. We were being summoned for separate informal chats. Mark, the head of HR, was a stern man who peered at me over his glasses. The company doesn't forbid office relationships, but a direct report and their manager is a sensitive area. According to policy, one of you will have to be transferred from your current position. Understand, I said, my fist clenching. Please don't make this difficult for Ms. Lynn. I'll request a transfer. Mark shook his head. It's not that simple. Caroline is on the executive track. Next month, she's up for a promotion to head of the entire Asia-Pacific division. If this relationship becomes public knowledge now. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. A massive promotion. She'd never said a word. After my meeting, I found her in the fire stairwell. Why didn't you tell me you were up for a promotion? She bit her lip. Only found out last week. I was going to wait until the project was over. So what do we do now? I grabbed her wrist. Mark basically said you either have to give up the promotion or in this, she finished for me, her voice a ghost of a whisper. We stared at each other, the emergency light casting flickering shadows on her face. "I need some time to think," she finally said, pulling her hand away and leaving me alone in the stairwell. 3 days later, our team was invited to a formal dinner with a local partner. This was a critical event. Since the rumors started, Caroline had been keeping a careful distance, our communication reduced to curt emails. The dinner was at a traditional restaurant on the Dubai Creek. I deliberately sat at the opposite end of the table from her, but I couldn't stop my eyes from drifting her way. She looked breathtaking in a dark green dress, her hair swept up, laughing and talking with the clients. "Are you enjoying our culture, Mr. Joe?" the client representative next to me asked. I snapped back to attention. "Yes, it's fascinating." "Then you must know that in our country, it is not appropriate for unmarried men and women to be publicly familiar." His gaze flickered meaningfully toward Caroline. "Foreigners, especially, should respect our traditions." A chill went down my spine. He'd heard the rumors. After dinner, I insisted on walking Caroline, who'd had a bit too much to drink, back to the hotel. Walking down the glittering street, a mix of alcohol and frustration made me reckless. I reached for her hand. "Leo, don't," she whispered, trying to pull away. Just then, 2 local policemen in white robes started walking toward us. Caroline's face went pale. "Good evening, sir, ma'am," the taller officer said in accented English. "May we see your identification?" My heart was trying to hammer its way out of my chest. Caroline's hands trembled as she retrieved her passport from her purse. The officer examined it, his eyes flicking between the two of us. "What is your relationship?" "Colleagues," Caroline answered quickly, her voice unnervingly calm. "We just left a business dinner." The officer looked skeptical, but eventually handed our documents back. "In Dubai, it is not wise for an unmarried man and woman to be alone at night. We suggest you return to your residences." When they were gone, Caroline sagged against a wall as if her bones had dissolved. "You see, this is the reality. It's not just office politics. Here, we can't even hold hands." "We could go somewhere else," I said, grabbing her shoulders. "Europe, the States, back home." "And then what?" she asked with a bitter laugh. "I throw away the career I've spent 10 years building? You get transferred to some dead-end apartment." We stood there, on the banks of the Dubai Creek, surrounded by brilliantly lit skyscrapers that did nothing to illuminate the darkness between us. The breakthrough came a week before the final project sign-off. Our biggest client suddenly demanded a complete overhaul of a core technical module, essentially trashing 6 months of work. "They're being poached by a competitor," Caroline said in an emergency meeting, her face grim. "They've been offered a cheaper solution, but it has half the performance of ours." The room was silent. This client was 40% of the company's Middle East business. If we lost them, Caroline's promotion was dead, and our entire team would be in hot water when we got back to New York. "Give me 3 days," I said suddenly. Every head in the room, including Caroline's, turned to me. "What's your plan?" she asked, a spark of hope in her eyes. "My old college roommate works in AI at a startup in Silicon Valley. Their latest tech might be exactly what the client needs now." I started sketching a diagram on the whiteboard. "It's not a replacement. It's an upgrade." Caroline's eyes lit up. "What do you need?" "Authorize me to speak directly to their tech team." And I took a deep breath. "I need you to trust me." Our eyes met across the conference table. In that moment, we weren't boss and subordinate. We were just 2 people perfectly in sync. "Go," she said, her voice firm. For the next 72 hours, I barely slept. I was on calls with California, rewriting proposals, and in endless, grinding negotiations with the client's engineers. Through it all, Caroline was right there, getting me whatever I needed, but never once interfering with my strategy. On the 3rd afternoon, the client's CEO finally gave the green light, signing an even larger contract than the original. "You've proven your expertise is worth the price," he said to Caroline after signing. He then gave me a long, knowing look. "And you've proven that personal feelings don't have to compromise professional quality." In the car back to the office, Caroline and I sat in the back, our fingers secretly intertwined below the seat. "Mark called me," she said, looking out the window. "The board has agreed to reassess our situation." "Because I saved the project?" I asked. She turned to me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "Because you proved that love and a career can coexist." The night the project was officially completed, a text from Caroline lit up my phone. I want to show you something. She drove me to the Burj Khalifa, using her executive membership to get us to the observation deck on the 148th floor. It was late, and we had the place to ourselves. The lights of Dubai glittered like a fallen galaxy at our feet. I come up here when I need to think, she said, leaning against the floor-to-ceiling window. From this high up, all your problems seem so small. I stood beside her, our reflections overlapping in the glass. Did you reach any conclusions? First, she said, turning to face me, I turned down the promotion to head of Asia Pacific. I stared at her, stunned. What? Why? Because I realized it wasn't what I wanted, she said with a small smile. For 10 years, I thought climbing the ladder was the only thing that mattered. But being with you, it showed me that work is just one part of life. The city lights danced at her eyes. Second, she continued, I negotiated a new position. I'm going to head up a new innovation lab back in New York. It's a lateral move, no direct reports. Which means a blush crept up her neck. Which means there's no longer a conflict of interest. My heart was about to explode. And third, she took a deep breath. I love you, Leo. Not because of a birthday surprise or a project crisis, but because you make me feel like myself. Here, 555 meters above the ground, I finally pulled her into my arms. As our lips met, the entire city seemed to be shining just for us. So, I murmured against her forehead when we finally broke apart. Are we official now? She laughed and shook her head. Give it 2 weeks, until we're back on U.S. soil. I've had enough run-ins with the Dubai police for one lifetime. We smiled at each other and kissed again. The story that had started with the most outrageously embarrassing birthday surprise had finally found its perfect rhythm. When the plane touched down at JFK, Caroline's hand was holding mine tightly under a blanket. The 2-week secret affair phase was over, but a new challenge was just beginning. Ready? She asked, turning to me. She wore light makeup, her hair in that familiar, no-nonsense ponytail, but there was a softness around her eyes I'd never seen before. Ready for what? To face the corporate rumor mill. I squeezed her hand. We've already survived the worst of it. She blushed and shot me a playful glare. Don't you ever mention that again. The company car was waiting. On the ride into the city, Caroline slowly morphed back into Director Lin, checking emails and barking orders. I watched the sharp lines of her profile return and knew she was bracing for impact. Sure enough, the office on Monday morning was buzzing. The moment Caroline and I walked in together, the open-plan workspace went silent for 3 seconds, then erupted in a flurry of furious typing. You didn't have to be a genius to know the company-wide Slack channels were on fire. Leo, Caroline, welcome back. Mark from HR was standing in the middle of the main corridor, his voice loud enough for the entire floor to hear. Regarding your relationship, the company has made an official decision. My throat went dry. Caroline stood tall, but I could see her fingers trembling slightly at her side. Given that, Ms. Lynn will be transferring to the new innovation lab and will no longer be in a supervisory role in her previous department. The company has no objection to your relationship. Mark pushed his glasses up his nose. However, you will both need to sign this relationship disclosure form, acknowledging your commitment to maintaining professional integrity. Caroline took the document, the relief on her face palpable. Thank you, Mark. That's very fair. The second Mark was gone. Kevin rushed over. Leo, I knew it. Ever since that night, she showed up at your door wearing. Shut up. Caroline and I snapped in unison, then looked at each other and winced. At lunch, Jessica dragged us to a diner around the corner. Congratulations, you two, she said, pouring Caroline a glass of iced tea. But you need to be prepared. People are going to talk. About what? I frowned. Oh, you know, that Leo's a climber. That Caroline's a cougar. Jessica shrugged. But most people are happy for you, especially the ones who saw how you two saved that Dubai deal. Caroline's expression was hard to read. I don't care what people say, but I knew she did. The woman who had built a fortress around herself was more sensitive than anyone knew. On Saturday morning, I was at Caroline's apartment, struggling to assemble a new bookshelf when my phone rang. The name on the screen made my hand slip, sending the screwdriver clattering to the floor. What's wrong? Caroline poked her head out of the kitchen. She was in sweats, her hair in a messy bun, a half-cut apple in her hand. My mom's in the city, I croaked, swallowing hard. She wants to meet you. She's downstairs. The apple knife slipped from Caroline's hand and clattered on the tile. Now, how does your mom even know where I live? Her voice went up an octave. I'm not ready. The apartment is a mess. And I'm. The doorbell rang. I grab her shoulders. Deep breaths. She's just a little old-fashioned, but she's a good person. Caroline nodded mechanically, ripped off her apron, and disappeared into the bedroom. She emerged 3 minutes later, transformed into a business-casual version of herself in a crisp blouse and slacks, her hair tamed and lipstick applied. I opened the door to my mother, standing there with bags of groceries. She was a small, wiry woman in her 50s, and her eyes immediately locked onto Caroline. Hello, Mrs. Joe, Caroline said, her voice more formal than in any board meeting I'd ever attended. So you're my son's girlfriend, my mother said, looking her up and down. You look a little older than your pictures. My stomach dropped. Dinner was an exercise in excruciating politeness. My mother peppered Caroline with questions about her family, her age, her income, and Caroline answered each one like she was in a job interview. I hear you're 5 years older than Leo, my mother said, placing a piece of chicken on Caroline's plate. You know, it gets risky for a woman to have children after 35. Caroline's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. The color drained from her face. Mom, I cut in. We haven't even talked about that. Well, you need to, my mother's voice rose. Your father's gone, and all I want is to hold a grandchild. Leo, you're all I have. Caroline put down her fork. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. I understand your concern, Mrs. Joe, but Leo and I are both at critical points in our careers. We have no immediate plans for children. The air at the table froze solid. My mother's expression shifted from shock to angry. And when do you plan on it? When you're 40. Do you know the health risks? Mom, stop it. I shot up from my chair, scraping it loudly against the floor. Caroline stood up as well. Excuse me, I need to use the restroom. The moment she was gone, my mother grabbed my arm. Son, you could have anyone. Why a career woman who's so much older? She only cares about work. She won't know how to take care of a family. Mom, times have changed, I whispered fiercely. Caroline is the most incredible woman I've ever met. I love her. From the bathroom, I could hear a muffled sob. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. That night, my mom insisted on staying at a hotel. After I saw her off, I came back to the apartment to find Caroline standing on the balcony, her back rigid. I'm so sorry, I said, coming up behind her. My mom, she's right. Her voice was a fragile whisper. I wouldn't be a good wife or mother. My life is my work. I can't even keep a houseplant alive. I turned her to face me and was shocked to see tears streaming down her face. The unflappable Caroline Lynn was crumbling in my arms. Listen to me, I said, wiping her tears away. I love you, not a hypothetical future version of you who can cook or have kids. I love you right now. If you want a career, I'll support you. If you want to change your mind someday, I'll be right here. She looked at me, moonlight glinting in her tear-filled eyes. Why? Why me? Because that night, I said softly, when you showed up at my door in that ridiculous lingerie, I saw the real you. Not just Director Lynn. I saw the stubborn, perfectionist, occasionally clumsy, but always passionate woman underneath. And I fell in love with her. She buried her face in my chest and finally let herself cry, great, heaving sobs. I just held her, feeling something shift between us, settling into a place of deep, unbreakable certainty. 3 months later, Caroline's innovation lab was up and running. My mom had taken over my apartment, so I'd moved in with Caroline. Life settled into a new normal, busy but happy. Then, one Friday night, Caroline came home at a reasonable hour, clutching a folder. They wanted to go to Singapore, she said, getting straight to the point, to run the new Asia-Pacific Innovation Hub. It's a 2-year assignment, minimum. The knife in my hand stilled. Is that a promotion? Yes. Vice president level. There was no joy in her voice. But I turned it down. Why? I turned to face her. That's the opportunity you've been working for your whole life. Her expression was pained, because it means we'd be apart for 2 years. Maybe longer. I don't want to make the same mistake my parents did. My dad was always away on assignment and... Caroline, I interrupted, taking her hands. Look at me. I'm not your father, and you are not your mother. We're different. Uncertainty flickered in her eyes. But Let's talk this weekend, I said, kissing her fingertips. About the future. Our future. On Saturday morning, I slipped out of bed early and drove to a small cafe across town where my mother was waiting. Mom, I need your help, I said, sitting down. She raised an eyebrow. Finally decided to break up with her? The opposite. I took a deep breath. I'm going to ask Caroline to marry me, but I need your blessing first. My mother's face was a storm of conflicting emotions. Son, your lives are just so different. Mom, remember after Dad died? I asked gently. All the neighbors told you to find someone new, that it was too hard to raise a kid alone. But you always said, I have Leo. That's enough. Her eyes welled up. That was different. It's the same, I insisted, taking her work rough in hand. She's that important to me. She makes me a better person. I just need you to try to see her, the real her, not the idea you have in your head. After a long silence, my mother sighed. Tell that girl to come over for dinner. I'll make my lasagna. On Sunday morning, I came home with a plan, only to find the apartment empty. Caroline's suitcase was gone. A note was on the table. I need time to think. Don't worry. See, I called her phone. Voicemail. Just as panic set in, my phone rang. It was Jessica. Caroline's here with me, she said. She's fine. She just needed to clear her head. Put her on, I said, my voice tight. A moment later, Caroline's exhausted voice came through the line. I'm sorry. I had to get my thoughts straight. Straight about what? Everything, she whispered. The job, us, the future. I'm terrified of making the wrong choice. I looked out the window. A hard rain had begun to fall. Stay right where you are. Half an hour later, I saw her standing in the rain outside Jessica's building. She didn't have an umbrella. She was soaked to the bone, looking lost. You idiot, you'll catch a cold, I said, running to her and wrapping my jacket around her shoulders. She looked up, rain and tears mixing on her face. I don't know what to choose. My career or you. Why can't I have both? Who says you can't? I cupped her face in my hands. Listen to me. I have a proposal. A proposal? She blinked. Yes, a business proposal. I adopted my best corporate tone. 1. You accept the VP position in Singapore. 2. I apply for a transfer to the international collaboration team, which is fully remote. 3. Once a month, we meet up in a city halfway between us. Bali, Bangkok, Hong Kong. We can make a vacation out of it. Her lips trembled. Is that even possible? Of course, I said, wiping the rain from her cheeks. We can video chat every day. This way, you don't have to give up on your dream. And I don't have to give up on you. She stared at me, a tidal wave of emotion in her eyes. You would do that for me. More than that. I pulled a small velvet box from my pocket and dropped to one knee in the pouring rain. Ms. Caroline Lynn, would you be willing to fit marrying me into your busy international executive schedule? Her sob was lost in the sound of the storm. She sank to her knees and hugged me, trembling. This isn't fair. I should be the one proposing. I'm older. I make more money. So what? I laughed. This isn't a corporate merger. She finally laughed through her tears. You know, she said, touching my face. That night, when I walked into your room, I already had a crush on you. I knew it. I grinned. No one gets that dressed up for a platonic coworker. The rain fell harder, but neither of us moved. In that soaking wet embrace, I knew that whatever challenges came our way, we would face them together, turning every crisis into another memory, just like we did with that first, disastrously perfect birthday surprise. So, what's your answer? I whispered in her ear. Caroline pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. Yes, she said. Yes, I will. The sound of the rain swallowed our laughter, but in that moment, I knew we'd found something far more valuable than any promotion. We were forging our own path, together. And